Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel presents Comic Talk. Today, we're going to check in and see what our guests are doing. We'll talk about our first non-superhero comics that we read and our top picks for our favorite comics of all time. It's all coming up next on Comic Talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comic Talk, where we get together with a panel of guests to talk about all about our favorite print medium. With us, as always, is the Duchess of Free Comic Book Day, Ashton Greenwood.
Hey, howdy, hey, what's up, guys?
And our special guest today, please welcome artist and writer EZRA CLAYTAN Daniels.
Am I freezing again?
Yeah, a little bit. All right. How's everyone doing right now?
There's a really loud lacrosse soccer situation going on at my next door neighbor's house. So if you hear squealing in the background, everyone's okay, I hope.
Things are pretty chill.
Yeah. Everyone just surviving.
Yeah. My neighborhood tends to get really loud.
I know. See if we can get through some of these connection errors.
EZRA, come back.
Oh, no.
We got you back. All right.
Okay, you're good.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into everything while we got the connection going. So, EZRA, you're a writer, an illustrator, and a designer. You've worked on interactive video games, animation, experimental short films, I think documentaries, even a collaboration with a classical musical ensemble. So our first question is there anything that you can't do? Like, humble us just a little. We got to feel a little bit humbled because, like, you've done everything. So.
Well, thank you. I think the answer to that is that the only reason I've done so many different experiments in different mediums is because I had such a hard time breaking into comics. So it was really just out of desperation that I was doing video games and collaborations with chamber orchestras.
Oh, are we back?
Am I frozen again? Let me go try to move to the modem.
Okay. We're going to get the traveling EZRA show here as he moves to someplace closer to his modem.
Maybe I can go sit in the bathroom.
That's a choice you can make.
See, but we all know that you're going in there now, so it's not like we're catching you in the bathroom, which is better. You know?
It's not weird if you want to do it, is what we're saying.
We know you're going there.
Here's the flower or the green wall we have in the bathroom that my girlfriend put in.
Love that.
Oh, that's the wall. I like that.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
It's like the background of the Lyft driver picture.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, wait, I like that. Hold on. This is like a look. Yes, this is your new background.
You should just do all of your filming like right there. It actually really works for you. Let's see if we can.
It was going so well.
How's that?
All right, let's see.
That's better.
All right. I think let's go from there and see how this goes. So you were saying that it kind of came out of desperation and
should I try to log out and log back in? This is like atypical.
Let's see, producer Johnny is saying yes. So
Okay, I'm gonna close the window and then re-click on the link.
All right. Thank you everyone on the show for having a little bit of patience with us. We're trying to get this the problems fixed with the stream here. I think honestly, I think it's because everyone's at home, and so everyone's like, working from home. Everyone's online.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, when we first started doing all these streams, I had like tons and tons and tons of problems with like the connectivity, with the picture being blurry, with like horrible lag time. So it's just because everyone's using the internet.
All right. See.
It froze again. I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm like right next to the modem.
Think there's a suggestion to try using it via a cellular signal.
Oh, like a hotspot.
Turn off your Wi-Fi and connect via your cellular signal. Thank God for producer Johnny, because I'd be like, I don't know.
Right, just like turn it off, turn it back on.
This is when I yelled at the hubby, and I'm like, Justin, fix everything.
Fix it.
All right.
Yeah, it was bad yesterday.
Seems to be doing a little bit better.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I need to just shut my mouth because apparently I'm jinxing things. Co-producer Johnny.
Right. Johnny he worked for that shout out. He earned that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm logging in on my phone.
Okay.
This is definitely the most memorable of these that we've done. That and the one where Jeff Vaughn just went on the most random tangent ever about I don't even know what.
I think that was like a lesson learned on having two guests at the same time.
That was
I can't corral people. Yeah, that was an interesting time because it's very hard to corral two people, and especially when they're like big names in comics, and you're like,
right. And they're friends, so they were just like feeding off of each other's energy.
All right, let's see what we got going. How's it coming, Ezra?
Okay, how's this look? Now you're on my phone.
All right.
Seems better. I don't want to. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm gonna jinx it.
Aw, thank you, Alan, but worth the wait.
Aw.
All right, have we got your back?
Okay.
All right.
That's not gonna work.
All right. Are we back?
It looks pretty good. Yeah.
It looks good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
All right, I think we're back. All right. So let's go back to that first question. All right. So outside of having like, internet, is there anything you can't do?
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of stuff I can't do. I can't sing. I can't act. I get stage fright. Yeah.
Aw. But no, you were saying that it came out of like necessity, right? And
yeah, because I was trying to break into comics for like almost 20 years before I got any breaks. And during that time, I was, like doing shows and trying to self-publish books. I self-published a graphic novel in like 2003 called The Changers that did pretty well, but it didn't really open any doors for me. So I was just trying to make comics on the side and had a day job. And then, I had a bunch of creative friends that would throw opportunities to me and offer to collaborate on stuff. And I almost always just said yes. So.
I mean, you do what you got to do, right? Like you got to keep grinding until you get there.
Yeah.
And so then what would you say was your introduction to comics?
Signal, by the way? Is the signal okay?
Yes, it's going great.
Okay, good.
So in terms of your introduction to comics, and you kind of touched on this a bit there, what would you say was your introduction to comics, not as an artist, but rather as like a reader and fan?
As a creator, you said?
No, as a reader or fan of comics.
I think. Oh, as a reader. Well, when I was a little kid, my uncle Bobby had a little tiny comics collection, just like less than a milk crate worth of comics, and it was all like 70s era Marvel comics. And I grew up watching like Super Friends and stuff like that, so I love superheroes, even though I'd never really read comics that much. And I discovered my uncle Bobby's comics when I was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9. And I got into those. He had like 70s era Iron Man and Man Wolf and stuff like that. And I really fell in love with those things. And then, I don't know, I was kind of too poor to buy comics at the grocery store, but I remember looking at comics at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Back when you can still buy comics at the grocery store. So I basically just like had my uncle Bobby's like 20 Marvel comics, and that was my only exposure to comics until I was old enough to like get a job and actually start buying my own comics. But the trick that I learned before I was old enough to get a job is that I used to actually go to my local comic shop, which is called Acme Comics and Collectibles in Sioux City, Iowa. And I found out that they would just like give me old previews catalogs like after they had expired. So I would just like, my exposure to comics and my comics readership was like basically just flipping through the pages of old previews catalogs, like outdated previews catalogs. So I'd kind of like keep up with the stories just by reading the blurbs and previews. Yeah.
Aww.
That's
Yay, preview
hilarious.
world.
Right?
I love that. Oh, I think we have a picture of the store. Aw, nice.
Johnny is impressive today.
Oh, he's really good.
Oh, yeah. That's so fun.
Now, do you remember any of the early comics that you worked on?
Now you're breaking up a little bit. What was the question again? I saw your lips moving.
Do you remember any of the early comics that you had worked on? Oh, no.
Say it again.
Do you remember any of the early comics that you had worked on? Oh, no.
That I worked on?
Yeah.
The first comics that I worked on were like self-published little mini comic zines that I did. I moved to Portland, Oregon to go to art school in like the late 90s, and I got into making self-published zines back then, and I was doing the kind of stuff that was like the very typical like early 20s comics dude trying to make like touchy-feely like autobiographical self-published comics. A couple of those, and they were terrible. I don't show them to anybody anymore. But it was a learning experience. And then after I did a few of those issues, then I started working on The Changers, which is my first big graphic novel. That was like a 200-page sci-fi graphic novel that I put out when I was like 22 or 23. And it was a really big deal for me at the time. But again, it's one of those things that I don't really show anybody anymore. It's really hard to find. But it was like a fully produced thing that I got distributed through Diamond actually, and it was even certified cool. I don't think you guys do that anymore, do you? But it was like a pretty big deal for me at the time. And then after that, I just worked on Upgrade Soul for like the next 15 years. And just pitched it around every couple of years to see if anybody wanted to put it out, and I couldn't get any takers, so I just kept on working on it on my own.
So it sounds like you've been kind of trying your hand at comics for a while. So when did you decide that working in comics was something you wanted to do as a career?
I was always making comics because I was always able to draw. I always liked to draw. So I was always interested in, like, I had a comic in my high school newspaper for a couple of years, but I always kind of thought I would be more of a filmmaker than a comic book creator. But I think I went to art school and I studied film for a little bit, and I made a couple of short films. It just seemed like comics were an easier way for me to tell the stories I wanted to tell. Like, I didn't have to work with other people. I could just go to shut the door in my bedroom and be in there for 6 months and come out with a finished product that I could hand out to people on the street, like random strangers. Or it was just a lot easier to get my stuff out there. And this is before like YouTube was a thing. So making short films now and posting them online is a thing. But back when I first started getting into making art, it wasn't really an option. So I got into comics as a way, just like an efficient way to tell my stories.
I like that. All right, now I kind of want to go back to Upgraded Soul because you had mentioned that earlier. One of the interesting things about this book is that it started as a serialized graphic novel for the iOS or iOS devices in, I think, 2012. How did that come about?
So that was another move of desperation when I was trying to find a publisher for this book, and I wasn't having any luck. And a friend of mine was a developer who I had collaborated with on some other projects before. He does a lot of experimental narrative, like interactive narrative stuff. His name's Eric Lawyer. And he came up with this idea for an interactive comics platform, and he needed a comic to be the inaugural title for it. And I was probably like 60 pages into drawing Upgrade Soul at that point. And he asked me if I wanted to adapt it for this platform. And since I didn't have any other options, I said yes, and kind of like redid some of the art that I'd already done. And then from then on, I drew and designed the book specifically for this app. So the app is like, it incorporates all these, there's like some limited animation, there's some like navigation tricks, there's like ubiquitous 3D parallaxing. So like every single panel looks like a 3D picture box that's tied to the accelerometer of the device. So when you tilt it around, it looks like it's a 3D thing. But the main feature was an interactive score that we had, that we commissioned from an actual composer. So every time you swipe a panel, it triggers a change in the music. So the music keeps perfect pace with your progress through the book as you're going through it. And it's an amazing reading experience. And I'm so proud of it. But it did, like, the app didn't really catch on that much until I finished the book. And then I pitched the book around as a finished thing to publishers. And then at that point, I won the Dwayne McDuffie Award for Diversity in Comics. And so on the back of the book being finished and having this award behind me, then publishers were open. And I think the marketplace has kind of changed too. I think people are more open to stories about an elderly and mixed race couple than they were when I first started to pitch it around. So the timing just worked out for me.
That's really cool.
I love the idea of the score. That's something that they've started to do with prose novels. I've noticed in like the beginning of the book, they'll put like a playlist of music that works well with the book. So it's fascinating that you were ahead of the curve with that. And this isn't one of our pre-prepared questions, but I want to go off to the side a little. How did you come up with the scores for that? Like, what was the inspiration for what that would sound like?
Well, the composer was a friend of mine that I'd collaborated with on a couple of things before, and we just both had like a really similar taste and aesthetic in music. We're both really into like 80s synth horror style music. And I think for me, it was like, sometimes I'll listen to music as I'm reading a comic, and I think I just noticed a few times that when it syncs up, the music can enhance the emotions of a comic in the same way that music enhances the emotions in a film. And I think the only reason that people haven't tried to take advantage of that more often in comics is because of technical limitations. Like, it's just not easy to do that. And there's some really cool comics that I've read. There's one called The Man from Harlem by, I forgot who did it, but it's a great like European comic from the 70s. And every chapter starts with the title of a jazz song that each chapter is kind of like inspired by, or it's telling the story of this guy trying to learn how to play the song. And if you cue up that jazz song as you're reading the chapter, it just totally enhances the experience of reading the comic. So I kind of wanted to harness that a little bit and use the music to enhance comics. And there's nothing about music inherently that changes the experience of reading a comic, especially when the music is tied specifically to your progress through the comic. So it's not like you're like listening to a random song and it doesn't always sync up because the song ends and you have to try to figure it out. It's just like all perfectly synced up. So it seems like a pretty seamless experience. Anyways, I really like it. You should download it. It's a free download. You can check it out, see how it works.
Yeah, I will.
That is really cool.
That's insane. So to walk this back a little bit, tell us about the concept for Upgrade Soul and the plot of that a little bit.
So Upgrade Soul is about an elderly couple that go through an experimental rejuvenation procedure and inadvertently cloned in the procedure. And their clones are severely disfigured, but intellectually and physically vastly superior. So they'll live twice as long. They have no of the physical ailments that the originals suffered from. So the whole story becomes about sort of like a philosophical battle of which individual represents the identity of the original better. Sorry, I haven't explained it in a really long time, and I've been in pandemic. I'm very unsocial. Totally messed up. But it's like it's like a philosophical sci-fi story. It's very like, I'm a huge science fiction fan, so I take my science fiction very seriously. So I wanted to. It's kind of like cerebral science fiction. There's no like aliens or fist fights. There's one kind of fist fight in the story. It's pretty low key. I actually worked with some experts in the field of genetics, molecular genetics, and optical engineering to make sure that some of the language and some of the science was fairly sound. I mean, obviously, like I made up most of the stuff, but the words are real words. So when you're reading it, it sounds like I'm smarter than I am because I talk to actual experts.
Now, in the book, the procedure that the characters go through deals with what you call the upgrade cell, which draws from actual scientific concepts. I mean, you were talking about like, wanting to be correct and having all the science in there. Did you have to do a lot of research to come up with the scientific reasoning behind the upgrade cell?
Sorry, what was the last part of that?
Did you have to do any research to come up with the scientific reasoning behind the upgrade cell?
The science behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you guys are breaking up for me.
No.
Well, I think you said was you're asking me about like the. You want to try again?
Yeah, if you check out the chat, the question's also in the chat. So that way.
Man, we are killing it today.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. And the answer to that question is, I mean, the premise of the book was just like it was just like a sci-fi horror premise that didn't have any backing in science. So like I don't have a background in science, and when I came up with the idea for the book, it was more just like I wanted to come up with a horror concept that I thought was really scary. And then as I started doing research into the concept and learning about how science might actually work, then that started to change where the story went from there. So there's one really big reveal in the book that I won't give away in case people want to read the book. But that reveal was specifically inspired by me doing research into how the science of cloning actually works. And this is something that I wouldn't have realized if I didn't, talk to experts and do the research. So I feel like when I don't know, they always say, what's the phrase? The truth is stranger than fiction. I feel like anytime you do research into something, you discover things and you make these revelations that are so much more interesting and more layered and textured than what you'd be able to come up with on your own, especially if you're working kind of in a vacuum, as comics artists tend to do. So I definitely recommend doing research.
Very important.
Right. So moving past Upgrade Soul, your next book after that was Bottom Feeders, which was released in 2019. So tell us how you developed that book.
So Bottom Feeders was a script that I was working on for many years also. And that was a script that I actually wrote as a screenplay. I write everything in screenplay format because that's how I learned to format scripts. So I had this, I was working on it for a long time. I moved to Los Angeles to try to pursue opportunities in film, and I polished off this screenplay and had it ready to go. And I don't remember why I decided to do this, but I was just about to finish Upgrade Soul. I thought it'd be a good idea to have 2 books come out in quick succession in order to like jumpstart my comics career. So I was just about to finish Upgrade Soul, and I decided to hire my friend Ben Passmore to illustrate Bottom Feeders. So the 2 books would be done around the same time. So I hit up it, he said yes, and then he worked on it for a couple of years as I'm the same. In the book, he does a lot of political stuff. He's best known for a book called Your Black Friend, which was nominated for an Eisner a couple of years ago. And he's just got this really wild, absurdist sense of humor that kind of informed the last few drafts of the screenplay. So I think I wrote it and Ben illustrated it, but there's a lot of Ben in the story and the script too.
So in the book, who would you say is the real threat, the monster or gentrification?
Well, gentrification is the real threat, obviously. The monster in the book is scary, but the monster in the book, I mean, this is a deep dive into the like themes of the story. But the monster in the book specifically represents the culture of the neighborhood. So the monster is not a threat in and of itself. It's only a threat when it's been co-opted by a usurper. So the monster is designed to just like heat and cool the building and provide like lighting and stuff like that. But it only becomes dangerous when a usurper becomes the mastermind of it.
Love that concept.
I think that was a pretty solid answer, considering you could have spent probably 20 minutes unpacking that.
Yeah.
So moving on, what are the other...
I totally would have if the internet connection was better too.
I would have appreciated that. I was excited for this question, but this is like a big question. This is like an entire dinner conversation question.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are you looking forward to working on? Anything you want to do? Things of that nature.
So Upgrade Soul and Bottom Feeders both opened up a lot of opportunities in Los Angeles and Hollywood, where I am now. So I'm currently working on, I just finished working on a show in the writer's room, which was exciting and a big breakthrough for me. I'm officially in the Writers Guild, so that's like a huge milestone for me. And I'm working on now, I have to think about how much I'm supposed to be able to talk about, because they say I'm not supposed to talk about much stuff, but there's a movie in development based on Bottom Feeders that I'm not really too involved in. There's a movie in development based on Upgrade Soul that I'm very much involved in. So I'm working on that pretty intensely, and then working on a script for a new story that may be a graphic novel, or we may try to sell it as a movie, but I'll probably try to make it a graphic novel. And then, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. You got a lot of balls in the air is what I'm hearing.
All right. Now, before we go on to our next segment, I wanted to bring up Black Violet because it's not only really timely right now, but it's also a really unique concept. I saw it earlier and I wanted to bring it up. Can you give us a little information on it?
Yeah, that's another one of those really complicated collaborations that I did years ago. So it was probably like 2007. I was working on Upgrade Soul, and this is right. I remember this was right before the recession of 2008. So I was like super, super broke. I was starving. I was splitting cans of soup with my girlfriend. It was a really bleak time for me. And there was a chamber orchestra in Chicago that was looking to do new projects that would bring new bring new listeners to their concerts. So they hit me up to see if I wanted to collaborate with them on creating like an original graphic novel story that would be projected behind them as they're performing their concerts, which sounds, I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a really complicated premise, but basically what they wanted me to do is to help them program their concerts and write a story to them that was timed to the music that they were performing during these concerts. And the music was all classical composition, so it wasn't like they were writing new music for this. So what we did was came up with like a program of like 70 pieces, and then I wrote a story and arranged those pieces in order of the story that I wanted to tell. And then I wrote a story that was specifically timed to hit the emotional cues of every one of those pieces.
Wow.
So like every 7 or 8 seconds, there was a new slide of art that was timed to the music. And so we actually had to have a musician in the booth working the slideshow, working the PowerPoint presentation like it was an instrument. So she was like reading along to music and advancing the slides perfectly in time with the music. So the trailer that you just showed is animated. I actually had an animator do an animated trailer for it, but the actual concert piece was just static slides that were just projected on a screen behind the ensemble as they were performing. And it was a 3-concert series that we ran between 2008 and 2009. Each one was about an hour long. So it was a full-length graphic novel story that only ever existed in the form of this classical music concert that performed in Chicago, in the Chicago area. So after it was done, after 2009, it kind of just was lost because they weren't performing it anymore. They found other projects. But since when the pandemic started, I thought it'd be a good opportunity because I thought I was going to have a ton of time on my hands to kind of dust it off and reformat it for Instagram. And I started posting the reformatted pages onto Instagram. So you can read all of Act 1 on my Instagram right now. And then I got too busy to work on Act 2, but eventually I go back and
That's really awesome. And I think it really is timely because, I mean, it's about the plague, but from a very unique perspective. So, yeah, if you guys want to check out that, Upgrade Soul or Bottom Feeders, be sure to stop by your local comic shop to pick them up. And you might just find your new favorite comic to read. And speaking of reading, let's check in on what our guests are reading, drawing, writing, watching, or creating. It's time for What Are You Doing? All right. So we want to ask each of our guests, what are you doing? We want to know, what are you doing to pass the time over the past few weeks? And to those of you watching, let us know in the comments what you're doing by using hashtag what are you doing. So let's start with you, Ashton. What are you doing?
Oh, I feel like my answers are starting to get boring because I'm not doing anything different this week than I was last week. So I'm rewatching Avatar because why wouldn't I do that? I've already seen it once all the way through since it got added to Netflix. So I'm going to watch it a second time. I also shamelessly spent $25 on the box set of like the complete series of Avatar at Best Buy, even though it is on Netflix. I don't have a good reason why I did that. I just really wanted to, and it was an impulse buy. Yeah, I'm also currently packing to go to the beach, so that's a thing. I'm super excited. It's supposed to rain, so I'm hoping it holds off and I can enjoy the beach. Playing tennis, whooped my dad's butt last week. Yeah, I know I said this 2 weeks ago. I'm still reading Call Me By Your Name because I got hugely waylaid. I started it and I got maybe like 50 pages in, and then I got completely sidetracked doing something and like totally forgot about it. So I'm starting that back up again, and I'm making a valiant effort to finish this book because I do think it's incredible. So that is what I've been up to.
Nice. So you've gotten addicted to Avatar.
Yeah, literally. Yep. Well, yeah. TLDR, I'm obsessed with Avatar.
What about you, Ezra? Have you developed any addictions during quarantine?
I started watching Avatar too. I'm only 2 episodes into it, but I've been doing nothing but writing this whole time. It's been really sad. But the one thing I've been doing is getting exercise, which I feel are important. And it's been a very sane making activity to just like, I don't know, go for walks or go for runs on a regular basis, but trying to have like a schedule.
I think that's really important right now because if not, I know there are a couple days where I've been getting mixed up on what day it is. I'm like, is it Tuesday?
Yeah.
Is it Thursday? And so it's like, I feel like not having a work schedule, but at least like trying to keep to a schedule helps.
Yeah, I would agree. And getting outside's important. Like it's super easy to just stay in and like
totally.
veg, but it's really important to get outside. Like I've been trying to hike more too, to your point about walking, because there's some cool hiking trails around where I live.
Yeah, I think exercise is really important, especially since we're all stuck inside.
Mm-hmm.
But excited to hear that you're writing, Ezra. That's good. I mean, that always means you're staying busy, right? All right.
Yeah, and I can't wait to, well, I'll be announcing stuff as soon as I can, but when you guys hear what's going on, it's going to flip your minds. It's going to be so...
I can't wait.
Man, I feel like we always get like little like teasers every time we do this show, and it's like such a like, oh, I want to know. All right.
It's painful. Like it's getting painful every time it happens. It just like gets worse.
Let's see. Do we have anything from the chat? We have D. Brad Gibson saying, "My girls and I are finishing Korra now, and then maybe we'll rewatch Avatar: The Last Airbender." Everyone's watching Avatar. Everyone.
Have you watched it, Mia?
I have. Well, I'm like 6 episodes in, but I want to pay attention, so it's really hard for me to like do other things and pay attention at the same time. So
That's fair. That's fair. There's a lot of plot going on, and my mom's like, "That's a kid's show. Why are you watching a kid's show?" I'm like, "This is
so
about
deep.
war. How is this a kid's show?"
All right. So we're going to move on to our next topic and our next segment first.
You always remember your first.
So anyone who knows comics knows that fans really love their first issues and first appearances. So for first, we want to talk about some of the momentous comic book firsts that we've experienced in our lives. And for this episode, we want to ask, what was the first non-superhero comic book that you read? And for those of you watching, let us know in the comments what your first was by using hashtag first. So Ezra, let's start with you.
My first non-superhero comic was probably Sin City. When I was growing up getting into comics, it was really hard to find non-superhero comics because I grew up in a small town. But we did have Sin City, and I got into Sin City, which was totally mind-blowing. And then when I moved to Portland, Oregon to go to art school, then I was completely exposed to like comics that I didn't even know, like comics like existed. Like we're talking about Mouse before the show, Mouse, like Adrian Tomine, Dan Cloud. I got super hard into Charles Burns' Black Hole, which is still like one of my biggest influences. But yeah, it was like probably like early 2000s I started to really get heavy into non-superhero comics.
Those are some really good ones. What about you, Ashton?
So this is a pretty easy question for me. I have a tendency towards indie comics anyway. Superhero comics aren't, my preference. But I would have to say my first non-superhero comic that stuck out to me was The Walking Dead. And I went through like a couple different iterations of how I experienced The Walking Dead in its comic form. So like when it was first, I discovered it, of course, as it was a show. And in the opening credits, realized then that it was based off of a comic book. So then from there, it became this like crazed, frantic, like I need to find it as fast as I can. So I started reading it online as digital comics. And then from there, later was like, well, I prefer like physical books anyway across the board, be it like comics or like prose novels. So after having found it online, then I was like, okay, I need a physical copy of this. So I like ordered it because I didn't really know where my like a shop was near me at the time. So I ordered like the first couple trades. And then from there, I had found a shop finally to go in and finally be able to like purchase floppies from my local comic shop.
Aw, that's always
right.
Let's see. I think my first one was ElfQuest. That was my, Richard and Wendy. I think it's Pini. I never know how to pronounce it, but it was ElfQuest, and I instantly fell in love. It was all about elves and wolf riders, and I named my first cat Skywise. So yeah, I was kind of obsessed.
I love
with that comic as a kid. That cat was like not wise at all, so it was really dumb, but it was really sweet.
I respect it.
All right, let's see what we got in the chats. See, we got Brad Gibson saying first non-superhero was Richie Rich. Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see, we've got this one. First non-superhero comic was Rainbow Bright. Aww.
Of course.
And then the next one, City of Glass. I think it's an adaptation of a novel. I think I've heard of that one.
Oh, okay.
Nice. Those were some good ones. All right. Now let's move on to our last segment, Top Picks. All right, for this round of top picks, we want to ask, what is your top comic of all time? This can be a particular issue, a certain story arc, a one-shot, or an ongoing title. Whatever stands out most to you. And you can let us know in the comments what your top picks are by using #TopPicks. Let's start with Ashton. What is your top pick?
So my top pick is, of course, Archie. I feel like I have a certain brand at this point I need to uphold. So I've said this a lot. I know I sound like a broken record. Like I'm aware of that, but like you like what you like. So I'm just going to talk about it some more. I really, really, really like the modern run. So like the current Archie continuity. Nick Spencer has it now. It started with Mark Waid. Because I think it does a really good job of accurately capturing and portraying teenage angst. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but like all the feelings that come with being a teenager and the way you talk to each other and the things that bother you and how you react to them. I think that teenagers seem to be a hard demographic to get written correctly. They're either like way too mature for their age or like whiny babies. And I think Archie does a good job of keeping it right in the middle and lining it up nicely to where it's accurate, but then also adding like all of those things that you expect from Archie. Like you want Archie to be ridiculous and clumsy and like put his foot in his mouth. And of course, Jughead's going to be like eating his weight in burgers and like it's just got everything that is what you expect from Archie, but is still an enjoyable story that can suck you in.
I love knowing that Archie is like a bet I can always win with you.
Right? At least I'm consistent.
What about you, Ezra? What is your top comic of all time?
Oh, that's so tough. I got to read Archie. I haven't gotten into that yet, but I'll put that at the top of my list. I used to always say that my all-time favorite graphic novel was Kings in Disguise by James Vance and Dan Burr, or maybe I'm getting the names mixed up, but it's called Kings in Disguise. It was originally put out by Kitchen Sink Press in the late 80s, early 90s, but it's a Depression era story about a young boy who falls in with a drifter, and they go on adventures through America during the Depression. And it was the first graphic novel to make me cry. And it was also, I think I love it partly so much because it was one of the first really mature graphic novels that I read. Like, it really felt like reading just felt like really accomplished and mature in a way that I hadn't seen in a lot of stuff. Yeah, even like my favorite stuff, like, I don't know. I'm not gonna drag anybody right now, but that's a great book. But one of my other favorite books is Domu by Katsuhiro Otomo, which he did, I think, after Akira, or I don't remember when it came out in relation to Akira, but Katsuhiro Otomo did Akira, which is another top book. But Domu is like a really concise, short, really amazing thriller that deals with some of the same themes that are dealt with in Akira, but just like in a much more compact way. And it's got like a little kid with psychic powers and a creepy old guy who's got his own motivations, and it takes place in an apartment building. So like a lot of these themes I was drawing inspiration from when I wrote Bottom Feeders. So it's like, it's really close to my heart. But those are like my two all-time favorites.
Oh, those are good. I'm gonna have to look up that last one. That looked really good.
Mia,
All
what are
right.
yours? You have to answer too.
Mine. Oh God. See, I don't want to answer the hard ones. I would say like I love really unique concepts. So I would say like Flashpoint Batman, I feel like would be my go-to, but I feel like that's kind of one that a lot of people know. So I would say Death Sentence, which is one that not a lot of people know about. But the concept is really cool. I've talked about it before, where it's basically like there's like a disease and it's sexually transmitted, and once you get it, it lays dormant in your system, but then once it gets activated, you have 6 months to live, but in those 6 months you get superhuman powers. So if you know that you have 6 months to live and you get superhuman powers, what do you do with it? And it's like that philosophical question of like, would you be a good guy? Would you be a bad guy? What would you do if you knew you didn't have much time but you had all this power? So yeah, I always just like those really cool, interesting concepts.
I would read that. That sounds awesome. I love comic books that challenge you to think about something in a way you ordinarily wouldn't.
Yeah, that sounds
Mm-hmm. I really love that. Let's see. Do we have any audience suggestions? Let's see. Brad saying Judas Contract from New Teen Titans.
All right.
Let's see. We've got Derek with Impossible to Answer, but I've read Epileptic by David B. multiple times now. See, I've also read Usagi Yojimbo multiple times. That's a good one. All right, and that's the last one. So now we're coming to the close of our show, but before we go, let's go around and do some plugs. Let's start with Ezra. Is there anything that you want to promote, and where can people find you online?
Me first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my my handle is at Ezra C. Daniels on all my social media. So it's out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
Perfect. We'll have to check you out there. What about you, Ashton? What do you have to promote?
You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Free Comic Book Day, which is starting next week, or Free Comic Book Summer, I should say. Next week, the 15th, is the first day of Free Comic Book Summer, so you can go to your local comic shop. They'll have the first wave of free comics for you to get. There will be X-Men, My Little Pony, Power Rangers, Captain Canuck, Asterix, and the Wern books. So really solid starting set. And then every week, then on out until September 9th, there will be more sets of free comics coming, so you have to keep checking back.
I know you're excited.
I'm hype.
I'm excited. I'm excited that it's going to last all summer, because I think it gives everyone a reason to look forward to every weekend all summer.
Absolutely.
Well, that about does it for Comic Talk. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us. We do this every Friday at 4 p.m., so be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified whenever we go live. Also, tune in on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. for Previews Game Night, where we get together and play some games, and you can join in with the audience and play along. And every Wednesday is Previews World Weekly, also at 4 p.m. And you can find all these shows by checking out previewsworld.com or Previews World on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Until next time, remember, not all heroes wear capes, but right now there are a lot who have to wear masks. Bye!